XP in Minecraft is super weird. You might think just kill more things with more XP, level up, what more is there to it? And I mean, yeah, you're right. But that's not the end of the story. There's a whole weirdness behind that dynamics with XP that makes it much more unpredictable and interesting than you would imagine. What do I mean? Well, here, this farm spawns about 130,000 pillagers an hour, and this one spawns about 20,000 an hour. The higher spawning rate should give more XP, right? Well, no. And some of you might be saying, well, duh, it should be the same due to XP absorption limitations. But what if I told you that the higher spawning rate farm actually gives less XP than the slower farm? Strange, right? So let's just dive right into it. There are a bunch of ways to get XP. Production of goods, murder, exploitation, and destruction are the main ways. But there are more. In general, the more quote-unquote difficult the task, the higher the XP given. XP is obtained through XP orbs, which come in set sizes when naturally spawned. Fishing, breeding, and trading all give below 11 XP max, and so drop one orb at the perfect integer size. With other sources of XP though, the 1 through 11 is broken down into 1, 3, and 7 as the only valid orb sizes. Above that, we have a whole list of sizes up to 2,477. Here's the first bit of weirdness. It's a little bit of a side quest, but it's kind of interesting. All of these values are prime numbers. I was wondering what the connection between them was, so I asked ChatGPT, which just lied to me again and again. So I asked someone known for being good at math, that I'm a big fan of, Redstone Jazz. He came back with some really interesting comments. Basically, it looks like someone at Mojang liked the idea of using the relationship of orb size times 2 plus 1, then selecting the nearest prime number above it for the next orb size. So we start with 1. 1 times 2 plus 1 is 3. It's a prime. So we continue and get 7, which is also a prime. Then we get 15, which isn't a prime. The nearest primes around it are 13 and 17. Here we pick the nearest prime above 15, which is 17. This works until we get to 75. We should pick 79, but for some reason pick 73 instead. The rest of the numbers fit the general pattern, so it's not clear what is so special about 73, but maybe someone spilled their coffee on it or something like that. It's really just 73 that is kind of weird. Anyways, when XP is dropped, the game takes the reward value and chops it down into valid orb sizes, preferring the larger orbs always. So for instance, most hostile mobs drop 5 XP as a base XP. So starting with 5, the largest valid orb size under 5 is 3. So the first orb is 3. Then we have 2 XP left, and 1 is the largest valid orb size under 2. Finally, we have 1 left, which is a valid orb size, so the last orb is 1. So for instance, an Enderman drops 5 XP, so it will drop these 3 orbs every time. The amount of orbs dropped is hugely important. This is because the maximum amount of XP a player can absorb is based on orbs per hour, which is 36,000 orbs per hour, or 1 orb every 2 game ticks. So the obvious conclusion is that the larger average orb size, the higher amount of XP that can be absorbed by a player per hour. To get a higher average orb size, you need to get more XP dropped from a particular event. In this video, the event we will focus on is killing mobs. There are lots of cool things you can do with other XP sources, including furnaces, where you can glitch them into giving you huge XP absorption rates. But most people still use mob farms for XP, so that will be our focus here. So harder mobs, bigger orbs, more XP. But it's actually not straightforward. The average orb size will be the average of all the orbs dropped for a particular XP reward. So a higher XP reward will generally increase the average orb size, but it will be impacted by the amount of orbs dropped per reward value. Since we have set orb sizes, the amount of orbs dropped is kind of random for every XP reward value. It's not actually random, but it is a bit chaotic. There is no straightforward way to calculate this. It has to be a manual calculation. I ran a Python program for this dataset. Then we can convert it into average orb size per XP reward value. We see that these peaks here are the valid orb sizes, since they just drop 1 orb. So it's kind of funky because it means that the average orb size for higher XP reward values can actually be lower than lower XP reward values. So looking at, for instance, an Enderman versus an Endermite. Funny enough, if we were able to make a max absorption rate Endermite farm, we would get almost double the XP absorption per hour from an Endermite farm that drops 3 XP than from an Enderman farm which drops 5 XP. It's interesting as an understanding, but I mean, an Endermite farm seems like a little bit of a stretch. There is a case in everyday occurrences though. For instance, a pillager. Their base XP is 5, but mobs that can hold equipment will drop either 1, 2, or 3 extra XP when holding any equipment, which pillagers always hold. My instinct was to say that the quote-unquote better equipment should shift the drops towards the high end, which would make sense, but nothing with XP really makes sense. Instead, it's just a random value per equipment, 1, 2, or 3, which is added to the base 5 XP. That means either 6, 7, or 8 XP per pillager, which splits into these orb sizes, meaning that it would be best to only collect the largest size orbs. But in these cases, we can't really control these parameters, so we have to live with what we are given. Or do we? Well, yes, we do. But actually, here's where it gets a bit interesting. We have to live with the orb sizes that we get from mobs. We can't change those, but we can manipulate how we absorb those orbs. This is a little detail, but it's very interesting and also impactful with farm design. It has to do with the concept of merging orbs. In 1.17, Mojang made it so that XP orbs can merge together. To be clear, the orbs don't add their values together, they merge into kind of smaller groups of orbs per visible orb. In the code, it's actually called the orb count, implying that it's visibly merged, but represents a cluster of sub-orbs. The orbs merge randomly, but into potentially up to 40 different merged orb groups per orb size. Once merged, the age of the orbs will be reset to the youngest orb, meaning if a cluster is continually refilled, it will never despawn. So what does this have to do with XP absorption? Well, it's a little confusing, but let's take a step back. If I have a farm that kills Enderman, that's 5 XP, meaning a 3 XP orb and 2 1 XP orbs. Assuming I can absorb all of these, it will be 1.66666 repeating XP per orb on average. The interesting part is when I can't absorb all of the orbs. Once I am creating more XP than 36,000 orbs per hour, the remaining XP will build up. As the XP builds up, more and more orbs will merge. The more orbs produced over 36,000 orbs an hour, the faster they will build up. Assuming a fast enough farm, the orbs will collect until they have merged into 40 merged orb groups per orb size. See where I'm going with this? Before we had 3 orbs, sized 1, 1, and 3, for an average orb size of 1.6666 repeating. Now when the orbs merge, we have 40 merged orb groups of each size to select from, meaning that the probability of selecting a 1 or a 3 are both 40 over 80, or a 50% chance of selecting an orb size of 1 and a 50% chance of selecting an orb size of 3. When recalculating for this, we see that the average orb size increases to 2 from 1.67, which is a 20% XP gain. 20% is pretty huge. We can also see this with the pillager farm example we showed in the intro. Pillagers, as explained, drop 6, 7, or 8 XP, giving us these orb sizes and an average size of 4.2 XP per orb. But here we like these sizes because the 7 is propping the others up. When we flatten the distribution, it actually hurts us, giving us a orb size of 3.66666 repeating, meaning that the faster pillager farm actually gives us less XP. So what are the practical applications of this knowledge? Well, it's quite straightforward. In a case like Enderman, when the average orb size is higher when orbs merge, the fastest farm possible is most desirable. All farms reasonably faster than the XP absorption rate will potentially get to steady state with 40 merged orb groups per orb size. But faster farms will get there, well, faster. making the farm more practical because it will get to steady state in a usable time frame rather than having to wait a long time to get the higher XP absorption rate. For instance, the Nembomb Enderman farm with a sharpness 5 sweeping edge netherite sword will give you a max Enderman XP absorption rate very quickly. But in a case like the Pillager farm where merging orbs hurt rates, we want to prevent merging. We could calculate the spawning potential with a series of trial and error tests to optimize the farm to design it to run at the perfect XP rate. Or we could just place a cactus here, or fire, or lava, all of which destroy the excess orbs and prevent this merging buildup. Pretty simple, right? But kinda weird. Anyways, thank you to Silnarm for the code discussion and bringing the merging topic to my attention. Check out his channel, he's doing some awesome stuff. Thanks as always to my Patreon supporters, and thank you for watching. Goodbye.